hot wieners and coffee milk, Dell's frozen lemonade and awful waffles, and of course, the most iconic Rhode Island brand of them all, Narragansett beer. The Narragansett beer brand was established in 1890, but brought back to its glory with new owner Mark Hellendrung in 2005. How does a juice guy reestablish the proud Narragansett heritage and launch a whole new craft beer industry here in Rhode Island? Hi, I'm John Wool, president of Main Street Media, where Madison Avenue meets Main Street. Welcome to another edition of Main Street Live, where we bring the people and places that make this state unique. Today, we're with Mark Hellendrung and Jim Crooks from Narragansett Beer.
Hi, I'm Mark Hellendrung, president of Narragansett Brewing Company.
And I'm Jim Crooks, vice president of sales and marketing for Narragansett Brewing Company.
All right, so I've noticed the vibe between you guys. So give it to me. Tell me the history. How'd you guys meet up? How'd you come together? How'd you form this company?
We have been together since 1994.
Yep.
At when we both joined Nantucket Nectars. I always get Nantucket Nectars in Narragansett because there's a lot of N's and A's and long.
Is that why you decided to buy Narragansett, because it had an N?
Yes.
Yeah, that was
yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yep.
You guys met up at Nantucket Nectars.
Yeah.
What kind of work were you doing there?
Jim, go ahead.
Well, we had various roles throughout our time there. I started as a lowly intern right out of college and was doing everything from repacking broken pallets of juice to chasing down people who owed us money, and doing sales calls, making deliveries in a van that was probably overweighted by about 1,000 pounds, driving through the streets of DC. And then I was in sales. I was in sales strategy and trade marketing, and then ultimately did consumer marketing after Nantucket Nectars.
So it's really where you learned about beverage marketing and everything.
Yeah. That's what's cool. So I came in, my two college buddies at Brown started the company, and I was in public accounting, and they really needed someone to kind of just get things under control.
So this is your college buddies startup.
College buddies startup, and at that point in time, we were more of a distribution company than we were Nantucket Nectars. So we distributed a lot of Arizona iced tea, potato chips, Crystal Geyser water. And Jim was at our DC distributorship. We had a Boston distributorship, Cape, and the islands. And it was just a great way to learn the business from the street up. And then, of course, Nantucket Nectars became a big brand. And we sold off all that distribution. And then, so we understand our customers because our distributors, because we did that. That's where we kind of started.
So the opportunity comes up to buy a storied brand. Mm-hmm. How did that even happen? Were they for sale, or you want to get a now? You're probably in your 20s, 30s at the time.
I think so. It's 17 years. So I was 35-ish.
Every 35-year-old's dream, right?
Yeah. To
own a beer company. So what was the inspiration? What made you want to get into a beer company? Walk us through that. So
keep in mind, this was 2003-ish, and I was in a bar in Newport, Cappy's Hillside Cafe.
Sure.
And so it's 2003. You don't have 11,000 breweries like you do today. It was probably like Sam Adams, Bud Light, Coors Light, Guinness, whatever.
And Sam Adams was the big craft beer at the time.
Sam Adams was the king, right? They had Sierra. And we're just sitting in the bar, and just randomly, I said, I had a couple beers. I'm like, hey, do you have anything else? And this guy, Harry Walker, down at the end of the bar said, give the kid a Gansett. And then Chalky, listen, I grew up in East Providence. I had a paper route. I remember the demise of the brewery, but I don't really remember the brand. I was too young. But this whole bar, it's just telling stories about Gansett and the salesman who used to call in this area, and the bus would come and bring people to Red Sox games.
I can remember that. My own father telling me that he was told by his father to make sure you always buy Gansett because your neighbor works there.
Yeah.
So drink local beer.
I've heard hundreds of stories like that.
Yep.
Yeah. So that was really the inspiration. I was essentially unemployed at the time. We had sold Nantucket Nectars. I chose not to go to White Plains. Snapple bought us. Jim actually went there and continued his work with Nantucket Nectars. And I just kept kind of like poking at it, and it just sort of became this. The more people I talked to, they're like, yeah, you got to bring it back. And here we are.
So it starts out, you're having a couple beers in a bar.
Yeah.
You're out of work, and then all of a sudden, and you're not really out of work. I mean, you're in transition.
No, I had a nice severance package.
Okay, so you're doing all right. You're doing all right. But you're in a bar, drinking a couple beers, and you have this idea, inspired by one of the patrons in the bar. Yeah. Hey, I should bring this back. So now, walk me through this. How does it go from idea in a bar to this?
I was actually working in the beer business at Magic Hat, so I was kind of a part-time.
Another one of the original craft brewers, right?
And so I got to work with one of the pioneers, Alan Newman, who was a great marketing guy. Similar situation in Nectar's, where he just needed someone to clean things up operationally a little bit. And so, I had momentum just on this Narragansett story. And I remember reading a quote by Woody Allen, 90% or 80% or whatever of life is just showing up. So I said, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to call the CEO of Pabst. And because Pabst owned Narragansett at the time, and he was down in San Antonio.
And how much were they brewing of the beer by then?
It was down to about, it was 5,000 cases a year. Okay. So there were a couple like.
And to put that in perspective, what do you guys do today?
About $1.4 million.
Okay.
Yeah, so a little bit of an increase. Increase.
Hashtag.
So I called up Brian, and so Pabst owns everything, like Lone Star, Schlitz, Schmitz, Peels, every old regional brewery from back in the day, they owned it. And
that was their strategy, right? To buy up all those?
It was a real estate roll-up. It was a roll-up by a real estate guy. So he would buy these breweries, shutter the brewery, sell off the real estate, and consolidate it in declining breweries. Gotcha. So Narragansett went to Indiana. So Brian says, do you know how many calls I get from people like you who think they're going to bring back a beer because they think it's cool? I'm like, he's like, what makes you different? I'm like, well, I used to run Nantucket Nectar's, and I know a little bit about distribution, and I really like beer, and I'm working up at Magic Hat now, so I feel like I've got a little bit of experience in this. He's like, you know what? That sounds great. Why don't you get on a plane, come down to San Antonio, and we'll talk. And he was great. The tough part was Pabst was owned by a trust that was, when Paul Kalmanowitz passed away, he went into a trust, and the trustees were literally a hospital, a college, and the Catholic Church. And getting them to do anything strategic or business-wise was difficult. So it took 2 years to get the deal done, despite Brian and I agreed, like, yeah, we should do this on day one.
So then, and Jim, how do you come involved? How do you enter this story here? You're at Snapple at the time, right?
Yeah, so Mark and I had already worked together for 8 years at Nantucket Nectar's, both Rhode Island guys, and stayed in touch a little bit. I didn't have the big severance package, so I went down to White Plains, and I mean it was an interesting move for me because it gave me a chance to get involved in consumer marketing, and I had been more sales and strategy before that. So it was kind of an interesting opportunity. Went down there, and it was a lot of great experiences, but it was corporate. It was corporate, and I missed the entrepreneurial days of Nantucket Nectar's. And Mark, I think the first time he reached out to me, he just kind of said, "This is kind of what I'm thinking about doing. What do you think?"
And you guys really benefited from having that experience in another startup, right?
Yeah.
Kind of got your feet wet first there.
Yeah. It was such a crazy time too, because we were so young. I think I've often thought that I don't think we realized how incredible what we did was, and we were just so naive and so young, and we just.
You almost needed that kind of spirit, a young spirit, to actually start something like this.
Yeah.
When middle-aged men or women go out and do that with all, you have mortgages, you needed younger guys or younger gals to go out and try something like this.
Yeah.
Pull it off.
Yeah. And what's funny is I was dead wrong on the premise of Narragansett beer. And dead wrong meaning I thought we would get all the guys who grew up on Gansett, drinking Gansett again, and we would have to really struggle to get the younger demo to drink Yancey. And almost the exact opposite was true. Like older people were like, it's not brewed here. It's you don't sponsor the Red Sox anymore. It's not Situate Reservoir water, and they were like too far gone and whatever. They were like bud drinkers now, and it was just really hard. But on the flip side, like college kids were drinking it. They just like discerning future craft beer drinkers were like, this is a story that I can embrace and kind of rally behind. So it was kind of like the anti-NASCAR brand.
Well, you speak about Brandon, you have an interesting history.
Sort of embraced Lovecraft just as a Providence, the godfather of modern day horror and a Providence resident. And so, we were, we've got such a storied past on all levels, Jaws and those two guys and a million other things.
But when you took over, you had this initial campaign called Drink Your Part.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. And from a branding perspective, why was that so important as the launch of the brand?
Well, we had a great brand with all this, 100 and, at that time, 15 plus years of history. And, the intent though all along was for it to come back to Rhode Island and get a brewing presence here, in our home state. Mark and I didn't know anything about brewing. So, at first it was all about, all right, we got to get, the packaging, updated, and we kind of went back in time with the packaging. We want to get the beer right, and we, brought back one of the former brewmasters, a guy named Bill Anderson. He helped us get the lager recipe right. And then we just started making, a push to get the beer back out there. And all those things were great. And, we were able to kind of get the low-hanging fruit locally, but all the while knowing, we wanted to have a brewing presence here in the state of Rhode Island eventually. So that was sort of the first salvo at that. It was 2009. We'd been back for about 4 years. The brand was making a nice comeback. And, we started dreaming of, having our own brewery. And the Drink Your Part campaign, I think the full tagline was, you buy a case, we'll build a brewery. We didn't know it would take us quite as long as it did, but there were a few, buildings that burned down and other pratfalls, along the way. But the great thing of having this place now is we feel like we've ultimately finally delivered on that promise some, 10, 11 years later.
So talk to me about this place. So this was just like taking over the brand, reestablishing it. I remember driving by this. So this is right around the corner from my office, and coming by here. This as a focal point right on the bay.
Yeah. Great
location. What you've turned this into. So, but people might not realize looking at this was a warehouse.
Right.
Right. That took a lot of guts, a lot of insight, a lot of skill to try to take that concept, sell it to other people, right?
Yeah.
To come in on this, and you had a real vision here. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, it was, serendipity is a funny thing, and while we had this, the Drink Your Part campaign started in probably 2010, and we opened this in 2021, right? And so people say, what took so long? And it, like Jim mentioned, there were buildings burnt down and there were just speed bumps, and we were just getting big, and we just didn't know what we were aiming at. And then it turns out my buddy he does a lot of real estate transactions for Brown, and Brown owned this building. And they said it's in a non-strategic location. Mm-hmm. Everything they're doing is downtown or up on the hill, right? And so they put up for sale. He said he had been looking for spots for us for a long time, and he said, "Yeah, you got to see this place. It's perfect." So
when you first came down, did you see this or
no? But
what was your initial reaction when you came in?
Well, I looked at it from a location standpoint, and most breweries you go to are like in an industrial park or like an old warehouse or something like that. But this is where I grew up, and I just knew it so well, where it's like the bike path that goes all the way to Bristol is right here. And You've got the north 195 east and west, right there and right there. And then you got Brown, and you got downtown, and you've got this beautiful 77-acre park. So it's just kind of a no-brainer, really. You know.
So, would you say that, Jim? Would you say that this is the kind of fulfilled that dream, initial goal of Narragansett to actually brew your own beer here, your own location?
Yeah, for sure. It's a delivery on the promise, that we would build a brewery, and more importantly, it's a place that people can come and gather and experience the brand in its natural habitat, and really, if they want to get the history, of the brand, they can get that here. It's a place people can point to and say that's where the beer is coming from. It's a real cross section of people too. It's the diehard Gansett fans that have just been waiting for a place that is a Gansett brewery. It's the young college kids that live in the neighborhood. It's just people who are Providence residents, looking for a neighborhood spot. It kind of taps the craft drinker. We've always had a broad cross section of fans, but we kind of dipped our toe in crafts and we're contract brewing crafts. But now that we have this place, we've got a great brewer. We've got a place where we can really get deep on the craft stuff, and that brings a whole different consumer as well. So it's just opened us up to so many more consumers, and as Mark said, the location couldn't be any better, and we're really thrilled to be here, and sort of the next phase of the dream.
So the beer I'm drinking here is not the same beer that my father drank. So tell me about the lager, the traditional lager, and what the plans for that may be in the future. Is there a hope or goal that you brew that again in Rhode Island?
Yeah, so yes, that's like wildest dreams type stuff. So this place is awesome as it is. We brew more beer in a month, 3 weeks, than we could put out here. So it's just like a totally different level of scale. So I would love to do that. We're talking probably about a $20 million project, and so we just started here. We're going to get our feet underneath us here.
Well, you've had a history already of taking big leaps.
Yes.
So I would not be doing my job if I didn't ask that question.
I would love nothing more than to leap into that gigantic ocean, but it's it's a process. So we're thinking about that, and especially now, just given the carbon footprint and the cost of doing things, and it would just be a lot better for a lot of reasons to do something locally here than to truck it down from Rochester, New York.
And this beautiful location, kind of a model for, I would say, a modern day brewery, right?
Yeah.
Brew pub. Any future ideas here, or expanding this, or enhancements, or what's in the future here?
So we're working on phase 2 right now, which hopefully will include a roof deck, which will be even greater.
That'll be
views.
stunning.
Yeah, it'll be fantastic. And then the 2-story building over there is still incomplete. So really use that for events and
so this is going to become even more of a destination.
Correct. And so we get tons of, Ezra gets calls all the time like, hey, can we do our wedding there? Hey, can corporate, and a lot of people want to do a buyout or whatever. And before we were talking about like the community beer halls, and I think that's really what this is, but you can't have a community beer hall if you're closing on a Friday night for some private event. So
you want to have your own space for that.
Yeah, we want our own space for that. Listen, we could probably make more money doing a private event on a Friday night, but you know what? That's not what this is all about. This is like, it's like what you're saying. It's a community space, and it's their place as much as it is ours.
And that's when I was walking in here today, I saw that you have events later today, and you have farmers markets, you have other types of events. Why is that so important to you, Jim? Why is it so important to have these types of things here?
Well, I think, once you have an event here and you're part of that community, it could be, a craft market. It could be, yoga on a Sunday morning, or, a spin class out on the deck, or we do a run club on Wednesday nights. Now you've sort of experienced this space with your friends and people who have the same interests that you do. And it's going to make you, want to come back. And the more different types of events and the more different groups of people we have coming through here, I think the more broad a fan base we build, and just the more welcoming this place is to a broader cross section of people. And we see it all the time. I mean, you can come in here and you can get people who just turned 21, you get families, with their dog, you get, old timers who belly up at the bar, and tell their old stories of working at Narragansett Beer. And you get people from all parts of town and really all over the state. And we even see a ton of, license plates from Massachusetts and further beyond. So I think it's already been jokingly called the Rhode Island Welcome Center that we never had, So, it's good, to come cross over the line about 3 miles and you're here. And
well, and you might have hit something, a welcome center, right?
Yeah.
And it's because of the community atmosphere. Was that the goal at the beginning, or did it just evolve into that?
No, that was the goal, and it's been fun to see that manifest itself even bigger than we could have ever dreamed of. And ultimately, I simplify what Jim said in that this brand, and it's all about stories, really, right? And you told stories about your father, and everybody has that. And so I think the events, the location, just the everyday goings on here.
It's more than just a beer.
It's more than just a beer, and all those things just create more stories. You know what I mean? And Jim mentioned, coming here when you're 21 in college, or we had a huge party this summer when Brown Med School, the day they get notification on where they're doing their residency, right? They came here.
The match.
Yeah, the match day or whatever it's called. So that was huge. And so those doctors will always remember having their match day here at Narragansett Beer. You know what I mean? So it's just kind of cool.
Yeah. Well, Jim, any final thoughts before we wrap up? I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to say anything that I might have missed or didn't have a chance to ask you.
It's funny that Mark just brought up stories and how important that is to this place. And you'd asked me sort of the process of me getting involved, and that was a big factor for me. It was my grandfather's beer of choice when I was a little kid. And so when Mark, started talking about bringing back Narragansett Beer, it sort of was a personal, soft spot for me to have the opportunity to do something entrepreneurial again, for it to be in beer, which is a heck of a lot more fun than juice, but then for it to have that personal touch. And actually my grandfather passed away 1 year after we started bringing Narragansett back in 2006.
But he got to see that you were involved.
He actually got to taste the Gansett against doctor's orders at that point. But he said, doctors be damned, I'm going to drink a Gansett. And it was just cool. It was cool for him to be able to see that his old beer was making a comeback, and that, I might have a small hand in that. So it's a passion play for me. And, I think, like Mark said, almost every Rhode Islander has some kind of story. May not be exactly the same. It might be about their, getting their first beer ever from their uncle and stealing it from his fridge, or, listening to the Red Sox on the radio with their grandparents, or watching Jaws and seeing Captain Quint, crush a can of Gansett. So everyone's got a story, and I think it's built, the brand to what it is now. But I think this brewery is all about creating more of those stories, hopefully for everyone going forward.
Mark, final word. I mean, you're the man that brought back Gansett for so many of us to enjoy. What do you want to say about that? And how do you feel about that? That, my son one day will share a Gansett with me that I had with my father.
That's a loaded question.
I tend to do that.
I don't know what the final word is, because it's a journey, right? It started, 19 years ago, and my wife wants me to retire someday, but I can't envision that day. So
are you doing what every guy would love to do? Own a brewery. Bring back a storied brand.
He's the Bill Belichick of the brewing industry.
I wouldn't accept that. And
I want to give you
don't see what happens behind the scenes. So.
I want to give you the opportunity, and I know, I run a small business too. This isn't very small, but I run a business, and I know people don't see the grind that happens behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So this is an opportunity to enjoy it.
Yeah.
And what would you, final words, what would you like to say about Narragansett?
Well, it is a grind, but it's a labor of love, and it's just it's cool that people have embraced it as their own, and like to go down the road, like every day I see someone with a High Neighbor bumper sticker or something like that. Like, how cool is that? You know?
Yeah, especially with everything that's going on today.
Yeah.
You know, maybe just sitting down and having a beer with people, not such a bad thing.
Yeah, and that's it. Just listen, don't get me started. Like, we've just gone in these two directions, and like if we can just pull people together over,
just have a beer
and just have a freaking beer and lighten up, man. You know, I think it would be great.
I think that's a great way to end it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you.
Lighten up, man.
Thank you guys for joining.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Yeah. Cheers.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having us.